Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic that I think is universally fascinating: love and relationships. Have you ever wondered if there's like an actual science to why we're attracted to certain people?
Definitely.
Well, we're going to explore just that. We're going to use Andrew Trees' audiobook, Decoding Love, as a guide. He actually uses some pretty surprising research: economics,
hmm
evolutionary psychology, even game theory, to kind of shed some light on, how we choose our partners.
One of the most interesting things Trees does is he frames this whole idea of love and relationships like as a marriage market.
Okay, a marriage market.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, that sounds kind of cool. Like, are we talking Wall Street here?
Right. It does sound that way, but it's not really as harsh as it seems. It basically suggests that people are looking for partners subconsciously who are of a similar value. But the thing is, how do you even define that value? It's pretty subjective.
Yeah, I mean, what makes someone valuable in the dating world?
Well, Trees points out that women tend to prioritize attractiveness and commitment in a partner. Like, those are high on the list.
Okay, that makes sense. But why those two specifically? Is there like a reason for that?
Yeah, Trees links it back to evolution. Women have a limited number of eggs, right? And biologically, they invest more in offspring. So they're wired to look for partners with, good genes, which we perceive as attractiveness, and also someone who's going to stick around, which shows commitment. So basically, it increases their chances of having successful kids. On the flip side, men tend to prioritize earning potential and attractiveness in a partner.
So it sounds like we're all just playing this game based on our biology, like without even realizing it.
Exactly. And Trees even backs it up with studies. There's one that found that shorter men actually need to earn significantly more to be as attractive to women as taller men. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
So height does matter, at least to some extent, which I mean, a lot of people probably wouldn't be surprised by that.
Oh, yeah.
So what about this whole idea of being out of your league? Like, is it even possible to snag a partner who's way more valuable, quote unquote, than you?
That's where things get really interesting. Trees says that trying to beat the market, finding a partner who's way more valuable than you in this whole framework can actually backfire. It can create instability in the relationship. He even mentions a study where women avoided the most attractive and successful men, maybe because they were afraid of being cheated on or like dumped when something better came along.
Whoa. So it's like there's this subconscious risk assessment happening alongside all those butterflies and stuff.
Right.
And speaking of navigating this marriage market, Trees also gets into the role of sex, or should I say withholding it.
Right. And this is where evolutionary psychology comes in big time. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense for a woman to hold back a bit.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Why would that be a strategic advantage?
It basically creates this sense of scarcity. And it raises her perceived value in this whole marriage market. It might sound kind of counterintuitive, but studies have shown that men actually find easily accessible women less desirable. It's kind of a head scratcher.
So playing hard to get really does work. But isn't that kind of manipulative? Like, are we back in the 1950s here?
It can be if it's not genuine. But what Trees is saying is it's most effective when it's targeted and authentic. It's not about playing games. It's like showing that you're choosy and committed to someone specific. And that actually makes you more attractive.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's about being discerning, not deceitful. It's about valuing that genuine connection, not playing mind games. But how does all of this fit into like an overall dating strategy? Is there a way to like decode the whole game?
Trees uses this concept called game theory to break it all down. It's a way of looking at how people make decisions when the outcome depends on what everyone else does. He uses the stag hunt analogy to illustrate it. Imagine a group of hunters trying to catch a stag. Big prize, right? But if just one person breaks off and goes for like a rabbit instead, well, they benefit, but the others might not get anything.
I see where you're going with this. It's like individual versus collective good, right?
Yeah, it's like a bunch of women all interested in the same guy, like a high status, non-committal type. If they all cooperated and held back, they might be able to change his behavior. But the temptation to defect and go for the rabbit, quick fling, it's just too strong. So no one wins.
So in this whole stag hunt scenario, everyone loses out because they can't resist going for the easier option. But are there any strategies that actually work in this whole crazy dating game?
Well, Trees talks about the tit for tat strategy. It's based on the idea that consistent honesty and good behavior, they actually win out in the long run.
So basically building a good reputation, like being known as a reliable, honest person.
Exactly. And this is where Trees thinks online dating could be a game changer. If platforms could track and share reputations effectively, it could actually make people behave better.
That's a pretty wild thought. What if honesty was actually the best policy in the dating world? But how does someone decide when they've actually found the one? Like, when do you know it's time to commit?
Trees talks about something called the 12-date rule from game theory. It's supposed to help you calculate when to choose someone for the long haul.
Hold on. A 12-date rule. That sounds a little rigid, don't you think? Like some magical number?
It definitely is simplified, but the idea behind it is about gathering enough information before you make a decision. Trees even have anecdotes of people who've used similar strategies, like dating a certain number of people before they even considered settling down.
So it's about being intentional, learning from your experiences, not like rigidly sticking to a number.
Exactly. It's about adjusting your expectations based on what you're learning from each date. You're basically testing the market, seeing where you fit, and what really matters to you.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Hmm.
But can science really explain that spark we feel with some people, like the chemistry?
Absolutely. Neuroscience has shown that being in love actually changes your brain chemistry. It triggers those reward pathways, kind of like, well, addiction.
Love is like an addiction. That's an interesting way to put it. I guess it does explain a lot about those intense feelings.
And there's even this study. Men were asked to rate women's attractiveness based on, get this, the smell of their t-shirts from different points in their cycle.
Wait, are you serious? Our noses are playing matchmaker without us even knowing it.
Looks like it. And it gets even crazier. Women on birth control might have a totally different sense of attraction because their hormones are different.
Wow. There are so many things influencing our choices that we're totally oblivious to. It's like we're being pulled in all these directions by forces we don't even understand.
And then there's this thing called the Coolidge effect. It's this tendency for desire to fade when you're with the same partner for a while.
Oh no. Does that mean the honeymoon phase is always doomed? But seriously, how do couples keep that spark alive long term?
It's not necessarily doomed. The key is to understand how desire actually works. Dopamine, the motivation chemical. Well, it's more triggered by the anticipation of a reward than the reward itself.
So what does that mean for relationships?
It means you got to keep things interesting. A little bit of challenge, a spark of novelty. It can actually keep that desire strong. Not playing games, but keeping things fresh and exciting.
Okay, that's good to hear. So it's not all downhill after the initial phase fades. But what about marriage itself? Is it all about chemistry? Or is there something more to it?
Great question. And that's actually what we'll be getting into in the next part of our deep dive. Marriage is definitely more than just that initial spark, and the science behind what makes relationships last might surprise you.
So we've been talking about this whole marriage market thing and like the science behind why we're attracted to certain people. But what happens after those first stages? When it gets to those long-term relationships, especially marriage. Is it just about keeping that initial spark going, or is there more to it?
That's a great question, and Trees really gets into that in the book. Research does show that married couples tend to be happier and healthier, but you can't just assume get married, be happy. Life's not that simple, Ray.
Yeah, I can see that. It's not like a magic solution. What about people who are unhappily married?
Right, that's super important. Being in a bad marriage can actually be worse for you than being single. Trees thinks one reason we struggle with marriage is we maybe set our expectations too high.
I mean, all those fairy tale ideas we get from movies and stuff, the happily ever after thing?
Exactly. And it turns out those crazy, passionate love stories might not be the best model for long-term relationships. There's this study, the PR Project. It followed married couples for years. And guess what? The couples who had super intense, passionate beginnings, they were actually more likely to divorce.
Whoa, really? That's kind of counterintuitive. You'd think those strong feelings would make for a stronger bond. Why would that be?
Sometimes those intense flames, they just burn out faster. And then there's John Gottman. He's a big name in relationship research. He can actually predict divorce pretty accurately.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him. Didn't he kind of debunk some of those classic relationship advice things, like active listening?
He did. It's super interesting. You know how we're always told to do active listening? To really try to understand our partner's point of view? Well, Gottman found that happy couples don't actually use those formal techniques all that much.
Wow, that's surprising. I always thought active listening was like the gold standard. Why wouldn't it be helpful? Isn't it good to really hear what your partner is saying?
It is important, but sometimes those techniques can make conversations feel weird. forced, you know? Gottman actually says that it's more about the overall vibe of the relationship, like having more positive interactions in general, not just avoiding conflict.
So it's not about walking on eggshells or like constantly analyzing each other. It's about creating a positive atmosphere.
Exactly. Think about it. Who would you rather hang out with? Someone who's always dissecting your words, or someone who makes you feel good, appreciated, and understood?
That's a really good point. Makes total sense. So it's not about never disagreeing. It's about having more good times than bad times.
Exactly. Little things matter. Kindness, appreciation, those go a long way. It's not always about grand gestures, you know? It's the little everyday moments of connection that really build a strong foundation.
It's the little things that matter. But I never thought there was actually science to back that up.
Oh yeah, there is. Gottman's research shows that the couples who stay together, they tend to have way more positive interactions than negative ones. It's about focusing on what's working, celebrating those wins, and genuinely enjoying each other's company.
So instead of focusing on all the things we're doing wrong, maybe we should pay more attention to the things we're doing right.
Totally. That shift in perspective can be huge. It's about consciously creating a good vibe even when things get tough, because let's be real, every relationship has its challenges.
This is all making me think differently about relationships. It's not about finding some perfect formula. It's about making good choices and really nurturing those positive connections.
And don't forget self-awareness. Trees talks about how important it is to really know your own values and what you're truly looking for in a partner.
He's right. You got to know yourself before you can really connect with someone else. But all this talk of decoding love with science doesn't kind of take away some of the magic.
That's a fair point. It's something Trees wonders about too. Do we really want to know all the answers? Or is a little bit of mystery part of what makes love special?
It's like that saying, if you analyze love too much, it disappears.
But maybe understanding it better actually helps us appreciate it more. It's like knowing how a sunset works doesn't make it any less beautiful, right?
That's a great analogy. It's not about taking away the magic. It's about adding another layer of understanding.
And maybe, just maybe, it can help us create stronger, more fulfilling relationships along the way.
So true. We've covered a lot in this deep dive. The marriage market, scent, brain chemistry, all kinds of stuff. It's amazing how much science can tell us about something as complex as love.
It really is. But science can only take us so far. At the end of the day, love is still a mystery. It's this beautiful, complex tapestry with so many threads.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember, especially if they're out there dating and trying to find love?
I think the most important thing is that even though we can't fully decode love, understanding it a little better can help us make better choices, create stronger bonds, and hopefully increase our chances of finding that special someone who really gets us.
Well said. And listeners, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep your hearts open to all the possibilities that love has to offer.
Until next time, happy decoding.
Okay, so let's get to those dating tips. I'm sure everyone's waiting for the secret formula. What does science say actually works?
Well, Trees has some advice that applies to everyone, like right off the bat. He really stresses self-love.
Yeah, that makes sense. Love yourself first, all that. But how does that actually play out in dating?
It's not about being, narcissistic. It's about having good self-esteem. When you feel good about yourself, you're actually more attractive to others.
Interesting. So confidence is key. But what about all that other stuff we talked about, like the marriage market and, those subconscious preferences?
Those are definitely real, but self-love is like the foundation. It's about embracing who you are, the good, the weird, everything. When you genuinely like yourself, it shows, and people pick up on that.
I love that. So step one, work on the self-love. What else does Trees recommend?
He talks about selective desire, focusing on one person at a time, instead of spreading yourself too thin.
So no more juggling 5 different dating apps at once.
It's not about limiting yourself, it's more about being intentional with your energy. When you focus your attention on one person, it can actually make you more attractive to them.
Like he who chases 2 rabbits catches neither.
Right, exactly. And once you've found someone you're interested in, try to increase your exposure to them. The more familiar you are, the more attraction can grow.
So accidentally running into them at their favorite coffee shop.
Exactly. Just, play it cool. And when you do interact, pay attention to your body language. Smiles, being expressive, those things make a good first impression.
Okay, good to know. That's good advice for anyone, really. But what about more specific stuff? Like, what does Trees say for the guys listening?
He says to embrace the sensitive side. Kindness, empathy, those are attractive qualities to women, so don't be afraid to show them.
So, chivalry's not dead.
Not at all. Hold the door, give a genuine compliment. Those little things show you're considerate.
What about looks? Any advice there?
This might surprise you. Women aren't necessarily looking for those super buff guys. Actually, they tend to prefer a more like average body type.
So, guys, relax a little on the gym routine. What matters more than a six-pack?
Taking care of yourself overall and dressing well, it shows you care about yourself and the situation.
It's about showing respect. Okay, big question. Do cheesy pickup lines actually work?
Honestly, the simplest approach is often best. Hello, my name is. That's it. Sometimes that's all it takes.
No need for fancy lines. I like that. Authenticity wins. All right, now I'm curious. What does Trees say for women?
He says, embrace your femininity, but also be assertive, confident. It's about being yourself, but also taking initiative.
So not playing a role, just being comfortable in your own skin and going for what you want.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to make the first move. Guys aren't always good at reading hints, so sometimes being direct is best.
I love that.
Yeah.
Take charge. What else? Any other words of wisdom?
Don't be afraid to show some vulnerability. Letting someone see the real you, that's how you connect on a deeper level. And trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
So important.
Yeah.
We often try to ignore those gut feelings.
Yeah.
But they're usually right. So
Okay.
trust your intuition. Okay, anything else before we wrap up?
One last thing. Be patient. Finding the right person takes time. Don't get discouraged if it doesn't happen right away.
This has been an amazing deep dive. The marriage market, scent, brain chemistry, so much cool stuff. It's amazing how much science can teach us about something like love.
It really is. But we've got to remember, science is just one part of it. Love is ultimately still a mystery, a beautiful, complex thing.
So to wrap up this whole deep dive, what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners? What do you want them to remember?
I think the most important thing is that even though we can't totally decode love, understanding it a little better can help us make better choices, create stronger bonds, and hopefully find that special someone who truly fits.
That's a great way to put it. And listeners, remember, this is just the start. Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep your hearts open. There's so much out there to discover about love. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.